Hello people, welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to put together your first guitar kit. Kindly been sent this thin line Telecaster by Guitar Kit Fabric, and I'm going to show you how to put all of it together. And one thing to note is, although this is a Telecaster kit, the same process applies to almost any guitar kit you've got. There will be some variations on tiny little bits, but I'll explain them as they go along. And I am going to have some other videos coming up featuring different types of bridges and different setups, etc. But essentially, it's the same for all kit guitars. Although I will be showing you close-ups for each piece I'm working on, I am also going to have this video going on in the background just to show you how quick it is to put a kit together and how straightforward really it is. So I'm going to speed it up, but it's going to have the time superimposed on top so you can see the exact amount of time it takes, including unboxing all the way through to when I put the strings on, and just after that I put the string trees on. What would be great is maybe you can leave in the comments, how long do you think it would take me, including unboxing, to putting the strings on? Go and have a guess. No prizes though. Now what's important to know is I highly recommend doing this dry fit before you paint or stain anything. That way you can make sure everything fits, everything is set up exactly right, and you know there aren't any problems. There are elements like the bridge and the scratch plate that you're going to screw on. It's best doing that now in case you end up having to make any changes. You don't want to do that after it's been painted. So I'll just quickly go over the tools I'm using. You're going to need something to drill with. I use a little pin vise at one point. I've also got my cordless drill. I've got a few different drill bit sizes. They're size 2 and size 3. Although it's solderless, I am going to strip a wire at one point. So I've got some wire strippers here. I use scissors, not just to open the box, but some other bits too, and a pencil to mark a couple of pieces out. I've got 2 different size screwdrivers, a fine and a slightly bigger one. They're Phillips heads. I really like using this. It's a socket wrench. I use it without the actual handle, I just do it by hand. But you could basically do this with a spanner or a pair of pliers. I use those on the machine heads or tuning pegs, and also on volume controls. Got a ruler as well. It's really helpful to have a long ruler like this, but you can do that with a tape measure. And I like a short ruler, 15 centimeters and 50 centimeters. But I use the short one basically because I need a straight edge. I'm not actually measuring with it. And the long one where you can use a tape measure as well is just to double check the scale length. I'm using some tape. This is from Guitar Kit Fabric's staining kit. It's great because this masking tape doesn't really leave marks when you put it on. Some cheap masking tape can do. And then I've also got, well, you can use string, but I've got some wool. You don't even need this. You can use the strings the guitar came with, but I use this to help line up my bridge, make sure it's in exactly the right place before I screw it down. So just before I dive in, I'll let you know I've already made a video about this kit from Guitar Kit Fabric, where I opened it up, unboxed it all, and talked about not just the quality of the kit, but also some things you might want to think about why it is you might want to build a kit and how brilliant it is for your own creativity. If you want to learn how to set up and fix guitars, or even if you want to learn how to make guitars, a kit is a great way to start. But that's in that other video. I'll leave a link in the description, as I will for the playlist for all of the things connected to this, including after the setup, which is where I'm going to add all the colour to this using the staining kit that the Guitar Kit Fabric sent me. In this video, when I show close-ups of anything I'm doing, it's when I filmed it after the fact, because I wanted to film the whole thing in one go to see how long it took. So you might see it looking slightly different. For example, sometimes the strings might be on, sometimes they might be off, sometimes things might be screwed in that I haven't screwed in yet on that longer video. But if you ignore those continuity errors, I'm just showing you how it works. I like to start with the neck. First thing to do is put the machine heads in, the tuning pegs in, and I just put them in really lightly to start with, so I don't tighten everything properly, just to hold it in place. Tuning peg through the back, washer and bushing, and I just tighten it by hand. Just quickly though, this is the socket wrench I use when I want to tighten it down all the way. One thing I like to do when I tighten up the bushing is make sure the washer hasn't slipped at all, because the washer could be slightly off center when you tighten it, and I like it to be perfectly in center. The devil is in the details. Once they're all in, I turn it over. You can see, actually, I've already drilled the holes in this because I did the full setup in that time video you're watching, and then I've gone back to film this bit afterwards. But basically I use a straight edge, a ruler, just to line them all up, and then I can mark it, or even just go straight in and drill the holes. And I like to do that with my little pin drill. You could use an electric drill and just make sure that you've marked how deep you're going and you don't go too deep. So this straight edge is making sure each of the bottoms of the machine heads are touching it, and then I would basically drill the hole on the end one, screw it in, and if at any point it feels like the screw's getting too tight, take it out, drill the hole a bit bigger. I'm using this smaller 2mm bit, and then I mark the other end, so I'm going from one end to the other, and then I'll work my way across them all, just checking they're all straight. Once they're screwed in, I turn it over and go in with this to tighten the bushings. I'm not doing that now because I'm at the stage, and a little bit of editing trickery here, I'm actually taking it all apart now because I've reached the end of the dry run, and what I want to do now is take it apart to stain it. And that's in another video coming up. I'll leave a link in the description to the playlist with all the videos of me working through this guitar and other kit guitars. So if you have a different kit to this, you might want to check out that playlist. So let's just have a quick look at the wiring. Essentially, there's no soldering because it's all push fit. I'll talk about that in a moment. But what you want to do is put the components that go into the pickguard first. I've got here the neck pickup. If you look carefully, the neck pickup, one side's a bit thicker than the other. It's a bit like a triangle there. That wants to point backwards. If you look here, that way it will match the routed hole for the pickup. And then depending what kit you've got, it'll be a different setup, but we're putting the pots and the switch in. And for this, it's the volume, then the tone in that order. And you can tell which is which because the tone has a capacitor on it, a green. If you get the switch the wrong way round, don't worry, you can just turn it around like that. The other thing you can do for the selector for the pickup is just swap the terminals round where you've plugged in your pickups. Normally you'd want it so when you're pushing forward, it's going to select the neck. When you're pushing backwards, selecting the bridge. So it just matches the direction of the pickup. You can test that very easily once it's all plugged in by tapping very lightly with a screwdriver on the pickups. And when this pickup is on, you'll hear the screwdriver tapping. So what we need to note here is the neck pickup has a path here, and then it comes out into the main cavity for the controls. The bridge pickup as well has a cavity with a hole that matches, comes through. I've just screwed the pickup on, and you can see the springs go between the base of the pickup and the base of the bridge. They basically push them apart. The same on the neck pickup. And then just before we fit it all together, we've got this bare wire. Well, this bare wire is going to go through the same channel as the bridge pickup, and you're going to sandwich the bare end of it between the wooden body of the Telecaster and the metal of the bridge. That basically grounds the bridge. All bridges need to be grounded. This is where you may want to strip the wire a bit so you've got a longer bit that's exposed to trap under this bit of metal. There's only one way round these connectors go, so you can't connect them in the wrong way. And the jack here, which I've already screwed in, connects into the wire that goes to the volume control. So think of it like this. The switch selects the pickups, so it goes to the pickups. The volume adjusts the output, so it goes to the output. Easy. And then it's all ready to go down. If you don't feel happy to do this by eye, you could measure it to make sure it's absolutely straight. Again, you can mark it in pencil or use tape around the edge to mark it. Anything you put on, you can rub off or sand off afterwards before you stain it. So it's up to you how you do it. Some people might use a bradawl to make that hole there. I could use my pin drill bit, do it by hand, or use the small 2mm bit on my electric drill. These screws are small, so you want to make sure when you put it in, you're putting it in carefully by hand. It'd be great if you could let me know in the comments which kit you've got from Guitar Kit Fabric, or which kit you're working on, or which kit you want to get. I particularly like this slimline kit with the F-hole in it. Then with the neck, I hold the neck in place. I push it into the neck pocket, hold it in place, lightly drill through, so you're making a mark to where the screw's going through. Take the neck off and then drill the holes. You want to drill the holes as straight as you possibly can. So you're using the holes that's already in the neck pocket as your guide for drilling into the neck itself. So I'm just showing you after I've screwed the back plate on. I've left the bit of plastic there, but often on my final build, I'm going to get rid of that bit of plastic. It's just there for the moment, so I'm not really marking anything too much. But what I did is made sure I drilled down not as far as the fretboard is there. So I marked my drill so I couldn't drill any deeper than that. And again, it's a big screw. I'm using the bigger drill bit. So this was the size 3. This is a really good example of why to dry fit something. It's very unlikely with any guitar you're going to get a neck that fits perfectly the first time. Even bespoke guitars, you end up putting it together like this and making sure everything fits by a bit of sanding. So here I can see there's a very slight gap here where the neck overhangs the pocket. So I'm just going to score it with I'm using a scalpel. Some people might use a marking knife. You could use a pencil. So when I take the neck off, I'm going to see that line there, and I'm going to know that what I want to do is thin the base of the neck here by that amount, not the whole neck. What I'm going to do is slightly taper it so it stays the width it is at the bottom here and goes to that width at the top. Hardly any change at all. And I'll do that along this whole length. Also, while I'm here, I'll show you these edges are rounded over, but it's quite a tight round over. And I haven't decided yet if I'm going to keep it like this on this guitar or change it. I might have a bit more of a round over here, and I might have a bit more of a round over here. These are all things that are nice to think about when you dry fit. You can even then, once it's set up, play it for a bit and make a decision about all of these things before you stain it. And another thing along those lines is I really like on a Strat how you have the belly carve here. And I could possibly do that on this Telecaster. The thing is though, it's hollow on the other side of this. That's where the F-hole is. So if I did do a belly carve, I'd have to carefully measure how deep the F-hole is to work out how much I can actually take off here. And I'm not sure if it's worth it or not. Again, you've got this opportunity when you're dry fitting to think about all of these possibilities. There's no reason on a guitar kit that you need to leave it exactly as it is. Sometimes I like to make some minor tweaks to it, sometimes some major ones. Now, in order to get the bridge in exactly the right place, I'm using the wall or the string, or you could even use the low E and the top E strings, but I actually find it harder using the actual guitar strings to do this. But I've threaded the string round through the tuning peg for the low E, into the bridge, over the saddle, back out again and round to the high E. And that way, if I put a bit of tension on the strings, and actually I'm going to tape it down with a bit of tape, I can then see exactly where the bridge needs to go. And you can see potentially if I move it left or right a little bit, it's going to go so the strings could go over the edge of the fretboard. You want them to be nice and centered. And then you're ready to screw down. And when I do that, you could mark onto the guitar with a bit of tape or pencil mark, or just hold it in place. But I always do one screw at a time and double check. And from experience, it's better to start with a middle screw. You'll notice when I'm putting the pickguard on, I'm putting the screws in one at a time, putting one in, screwing it on, drilling a hole, screwing it in, drilling a hole, screwing it in. That way I can make sure everything is perfectly lined up and hasn't slipped when I'm doing it. I try to start in opposite corners or as far away as possible as I can. If something slips and you're just doing it one at a time and the pickguard's not in the right place, you can take that screw out, push it a bit so it's in the right place, and start drilling with the other holes. And then you can always go back and fill that hole that was in slightly the wrong place. I'll be honest with you, it doesn't happen that often, but when I first put a pickguard on, I definitely had it. So it was in what I thought was the right place, started drilling the holes and realised it had slipped round very slightly. So do watch out for that. So for drilling the pickguard, I'm using the size 3 bit, making sure I went down not too far, but it's got to be deep enough that the screw will actually fit in. That's where you might want to use the masking tape around the drill bit trick if you're not confident enough to do it yourself. And then I would recommend putting the screw in by hand with a screwdriver, unless you've got an electric screwdriver like mine, where you can change the torsion. I'm going to have it quite low because I want to make sure that when I put it in, I don't tighten too much and crack the pickguard. Now what I haven't done is, once I drilled the hole, lifted the pickguard up and cleaned it out, because you're probably going to have a bit of sawdust underneath. And that might mean that the pickguard doesn't settle perfectly. But the reason I haven't done that is I'm not that worried about it at the moment, because the pickguard is all going to come off when I stain the top. Now here's the part that will differ depending on the guitar you've got, but the bridges are going to need to be screwed down, and where you screw them down is a bit different. For example, a floating trem like on a Strat is going to drill at the front, whereas this one drills at the back. I will have other videos talking about the different bridges and how you touch them on a kit guitar, but I also have on my channel a whole series covering loads of different bridges from different guitars that you can get, going in depth about how they work. And watching those videos, if you've got a very specific bridge, will give you an indication of how you put it all together on your kit guitar. Here I'm taking my drill bit and my screw, and I'm basically marking where the bottom of the screw is on the drill bit, so I know not to go any deeper than that. Don't need to, the screw's not going to go that deep. Then I can drill it in, and if you're using electric drill, use one that's got a torque control so you don't over tighten to start with. So there we go, that's hit the torque, so I can turn it up a bit. So for the strap pin, you want it marked up halfway of the thickness of the body, and I like it to be perfectly in line with the middle, so I just measured across from the middle of the bridge, made a little mark and followed it down. It's a small screw, so I used the small drill bit, the size 2, and when you screw in, you may want to do it by hand, unless you've got one of those screwdrivers with a torque control. Again, you don't want to over tighten any of the screws. I'm going to have a following video on how to set up your guitar once you put it together, because that's a whole really important process and needs lots of details. And once you've got it built, you're going to want to watch that video a few times to save you having to sit through all the building video again. Once the strings are on, you can now put on the string trees. So I lie them on the strings where I want them to go. And I quite like them close together, so they're sort of overlapping between the 6th string and the 5th string's tuning peg. Now, some people have them slightly differently. They might have this one further forward, but it's up to you. You can always look at photos online and see what you like. But the idea is they're going to help pull the strings here down a bit more of an angle, and that helps keep them in place on the nut. So closer like this is great. Some people like it a little bit further away so you can get access to here, which is where the truss rod adjustment is. But it depends what you're using. The kit came with an Allen key like this, so as long as there's room to go like that and change, it's probably okay. You can see I've already drilled this one, and I'm going in close up. Once it's in place, I can put my drill above it and literally drill down. Don't drill down all the way, it's just sort of to mark out where it's going. And the advantage of doing it like this with the strings on is you know you're not going to end up having your saddle where it's pulling it sort of to one side, skew it in any way. You want your strings to look nice and straight when they're coming off of the nut, under the string tree, into the machine heads. Now it's a small screw, so I'm using the small drill bit, the number 2, and you can see how I've drilled. I've just literally drilled this and made a mark. What you can then do is take the saddle off, take the strings off, drill in using that masking tape technique to make sure you're not going in too far. Remember that you're not going in all the depth of the screw because you're going to be using these little risers. The big riser goes for the one closest to the string, to the nut, and the small riser is the one furthest away from the nut. Some people choose to have a small riser here and no riser on there, but I find it much easier to have the 2 risers that's supplied. Now, I'm quite confident to drill the holes while the strings are on, but you may want to take the strings off again and do this. It's also much easier to screw this in place when the strings aren't there, but there's no harm doing it. You may even want to loosen the tension on the strings a bit to make it easier, but I haven't actually completely tightened the strings up to the full tuning because I knew I was going to do this. And I'm just going to use my Allen wrench to help put it in place, and then I can tighten it. Now, if that hole was too big, or potentially if it was too deep, it might not grip so tightly. So do always double check the bit, but 2 seem perfect for this one. Obviously, if you go too far, you can go through to the back. Stop the clock! It took me 1 hour and 20 minutes. Did you guess it right? Great, so thanks for watching. I've left links in the video description for where you can buy the kit from and other things from Guitar Kit Fabric. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more of these sort of builds and things to do with kit guitars. Until next time, happy strumming.